you viewers, this is Abhishek from Analog Thoughts. Welcome to my YouTube channel. I'm a photographer based on the east coast of Canada and welcome to my first YouTube video. I am so excited to start this journey with you all. Today we are going to be talking about a camera that everybody and their grandma wants but they cannot get one. Yes, I am talking about the Fujifilm x100vi. The x100 line of cameras is Fujifilm's most popular line of cameras thanks to the TikTok hype and for good reason. So today we are going to talk about what makes this camera an amazing everyday carry camera for myself and for many others. What are some things that I like about the camera? What are some things that I don't like about the camera and would love to see in the next iteration of the x100 line. So let's jump right into it and let's take a look. The first thing that I really like about the camera is the form factor. This is such a compact camera setup here and they have added so many features in this tiny little body, and this camera really packs a punch. This thing is extremely portable and mildly pocketable. If you have big pockets, you can just slide one right in. This camera you can carry everywhere. I use it for my travels, for street photography, events, or if I'm going to a concert, I can just sneak this bad boy in. The next thing I love about the camera is the user experience that it offers. Now everyone who has used a Fujifilm camera or have heard about a Fujifilm camera, they're already aware of the Fujifilm film simulations that these cameras are famous for. On top of that, you can also tweak the settings and bake recipes on JPEGs, and the JPEGs that come out of this camera are amazing. They don't require any editing or minimal editing, I would say. And if you're like me, you're lazy, you don't want to spend a lot of time on post-processing the raw files and you want something quicker that's equally as good, you want something to post on your social media, the straight out of camera JPEGs are really handy that come out of this camera. Thanks to Fuji X Weekly, I'm going to link them down below. If you haven't already checked them out, please go check them out. And a bunch of other creators who are now creating their own recipes. Those are all incredible resources if you want to dive into the world of Fujifilm film recipes. And what's even more awesome is Fujifilm cameras allow you to have 7 custom recipe banks where you can store 7 different recipes. And you can also take advantage of a software called Fujifilm X-Raw Studio, which lets you save those recipes using the camera sensor. You connect the camera with a USB to your computer, open Fujifilm X-Raw Studio, and just dial in the recipes there and you can store as many as you want, and it also allows you to import and export those recipes in and out of the camera. So if you don't like a recipe, you can just delete it, connect it to your computer, open X-Raw Studio and import a new one. That makes a really handy workflow and I can circle back and forth to as many recipes as I want, and there's endless possibilities there. The next thing I want to talk about is the leaf shutter. So this camera has a leaf shutter, and what does that mean is silent shutter operation. So look how silent this thing is. You can't even hear the shutter, it's so silent. It's so silent that sometimes I have to open the camera and make sure did I really click the picture or did I not make it. So it makes it incredible if you're doing street photography or you are covering some event or a wedding and you just want to step back and you want to snap away without being loud or without grabbing someone's attention. Another advantage of having a leaf shutter is you can sync flash to a really high shutter speed without having any issues. So if it applies to you, a leaf shutter is very, very helpful. The next thing that I love about the camera is a built-in ND filter and a flash. The ND filter, or a neutral density filter, acts as sunglasses for your camera when it's really bright out. So imagine you're out in the sun, it's broad daylight outside and you want to shoot a scene. You want to shoot it at wide open aperture, which is f2 on this camera, without having to compromise for a really high shutter speed. You can just turn the ND filter on, and what I've done to customize the ND filter is I've added it to a button here so it's as good as a click away for me, and that helps me shoot any particular scene at wide open apertures without cranking the shutter speed really high. The flash on this camera is a blessing when you are shooting indoors and you want to account for low light capabilities. You can just use the flash and that fills in, and according to me it gives that 90s retro film camera vibe as well. I used to shoot film back in the day, so having a flash here is a really big advantage for me personally. The viewfinder on this thing is chef's kiss. There's actually 2 viewfinders inside. There's your normal electronic viewfinder which you can just look through, And you can also switch to an optical viewfinder by the flick of this switch here. I think it's on the right, and it switches to that optical viewfinder, which gives you that old rangefinder style layout inside the viewfinder. And it also has a small electronic rangefinder, which is like a tiny square that opens up on the bottom right of the viewfinder. It gives you a preview of the scene you're shooting, and it makes you feel like you're using an old rangefinder style camera. I used to shoot film back in the day, as I've said before. Makes me feel right at home when I use the viewfinder. It's a really fun feature to have here, and it makes you really compose the shot looking through the viewfinder. Makes you want to use the viewfinder more often than just looking at this LCD screen. Last but not the least is IBIS, in-body image stabilization. So having IBIS on this camera has been a godsend for me, which makes it an excellent camera for B-roll videos. So when I'm outside and I want to shoot a video, or even inside for that matter, having IBIS on this camera means that I don't have to put this on a tripod. I can just quickly shoot a B-roll and I don't have to worry about micro jitters. So the predecessor, the x100vi that I used to have before this camera, did not have IBIS on it, which made it really frustrating when it came to shooting videos on that camera. The videos were unusable because of the shakes. So having IBIS on this means that you don't have to worry about that anymore, and you can get away with shooting at low shutter speed, or if you want to do handheld shooting without having to put this on a tripod. It's crazy to me how they have incorporated IBIS in such a tiny body. So kudos, Fujifilm. Now, it's not always sunshine and rainbows. There are some things that I don't like on this camera and would love to see improved on the next iteration. The first thing that I dislike on this camera is the battery life. So whoever has used this camera or the predecessor, they know exactly what I'm talking about, and they would relate with this sentiment. The battery life is nothing to write home about. If you're like me, who opens the camera when they want to shoot and they turn it off when they're not using it, you can get away with 1 day of decent usage. But if you want to keep the camera on at all time, or you are in a situation where you have to shoot videos and shoot a lot of continuous high-speed burst images, the battery might drain faster for you, and you may want to invest in another battery. So I hope Fujifilm can use a better battery in the next iteration. The next thing that I don't like on this camera is the lens. It uses a 23mm fixed f2 lens, which has been the same lens on the predecessor. Now, this camera has an improved sensor. It's a 40.2 megapixel APS-C sensor, but they haven't improved the lens on this thing. So the lens is not able to fully resolve the sensor, which is crazy to me. Why would you want to use a 40.2 megapixel sensor and have a lens on that which is not able to resolve the full power of the sensor? So I hope the next iteration of this X100 line is able to have a new iteration of the lens as well. So maybe a 23mm f2 Mark II, or f1.8, or even a 27 pancake, as long as it's able to resolve the full sensor's capacity. The next thing that I don't like about this camera is the ergonomics. The lack of grip here makes it harder for you to hold it for a whole day and walk around, especially if you have bigger hands like me. So what I've done to compensate for that is invested in this Peak Design cuff here. So what it does is it helps me just dangle the camera here, and I can just use this here to keep holding the camera for a longer period of time. So this is a little bit helpful, but having an additional grip or better ergonomics here to hold the camera for longer periods of time would be a welcoming feature in the next iteration. I've seen people use third-party grips that makes it ergonomically holdable, but having a native grip in the next iteration would be really helpful. The next thing that I don't like on this camera is the lack of D-pads. So if Fujifilm is able to add D-pads here, this would be very helpful and lets you add more customization to your camera. I used to have a Fujifilm X-T4 before, which I upgraded to the X-H2, which I then upgraded to the Sony a7R5, which is what I'm shooting on right now. And this is going to be a topic for another video, why I switched from Fujifilm to Sony. But Fujifilm X-T4 and X-H2 both had D-pads here, which would just offer more customization to me. And lacking the D-pads here is something that I miss and would love to see in the next iteration. So another thing that I don't like about this camera is the lack of weather sealing. It's really crazy to me that this camera, being about $100 cheaper than the X-T5, doesn't have weather sealing, and X-T5 is supposed to be a superior camera on paper. So in order to weather seal this camera and you can still weather seal it, you have to invest in an additional accessory, which is a lens hood and a filter ring here. So after putting the filter ring and a lens hood on top of that, it fully weather seals the camera. So basically you need a filter to protect the lens and also complete the weather sealing. And in order for you to add a filter to this lens here, you need to first buy a filter ring, because there is no filter ring that can accommodate a filter on this lens. The last thing that I dislike about this camera is the placement of the tripod mount. So the tripod mount sits right next to the battery door. So imagine this thing on a tripod and you want to open the battery door, you want to change the battery or take the memory card out. You won't be able to open it because it's going to bump into the tripod. And that's just a bad design. So I know I spoke about user experience as one of the things that I love about the camera. This is also a bad user experience that I would like to see improved on the next iteration. So that's it for today, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope you found something useful and found something you resonated with in this video. I would see you all in my next video where I speak about how I customized my x100vi. So stay tuned and keep an eye out for the next video. See you all there. Bye.